Hello and welcome back to Quarterlight. Today we're going to look at something a little bit different, a little bit more unusual, and to a certain degree kind of like a little bit of a confusing history. It's the Vauxhall Firenze. Firenze, or Firenze, was named after an Italian city, but we better know that in English as Florence. It came out in 1971 as a two-door coupe, or I suppose fastback if you prefer that terminology, with 4 seats in it. And it looked pretty good really. It was an attractive looking car when it started out. And there's a wide range of engine choices. It started off with a 1200cc engine, and by the end it had this 2.3 litre high performance engine. But the interesting thing, or possibly even confusing thing about the Firenze, was in 1973 when the Firenze HP, or high performance Firenze, came out, and that was the 2.3 litre. But what differentiated that from what the Firenze was initially was they put an aerodynamic nose on it, so to speak, and it did function as an aerodynamic item. It did increase the coefficient to what the Firenze initially was. Now, some people will know this Firenze as the Droopsnoot, although really that was never really an official title for the Firenze, or Firenze HP, but it did become known as that because of the unusual look at the front, and it was quite a striking car, and it's still a very attractive car. The interesting thing really is, and when this came out, the original Firenze, which had the square front, then changed its name to the Magnum Coupe, just to make things more complicated. So that's initially this car, which was really a development of Aviva, changed its name, got a new front nose, and they went kind of like separate ways. So quite an unusual and confusing car in many ways, as so many of the 70s cars certainly was. The brochure we're going to look at is actually from 1973, so it is a very early one when this particular car came out, and as you can see, it's just been referred to as the Vauxhall Firenze, although it is that Droopsnoot one, the one with the more aerodynamic front end. So let's dive into this brochure and see what interesting things we can pick out from this. So again, here is another look at the front cover of this particular brochure. And like I say, one of the interesting things of this brochure, when the Firenze HP officially debuted at the London Motor Show, that was October 1973, and indeed this brochure is dated and printed in October 73, so I guess it is one of the earliest brochures for this particular Firenze HP. And like I say, no mention of it being referred to as the HP. They're still just referring to it as the Vauxhall Firenze here. The front end here was a fiberglass nose, as I've said, and it does improve the aerodynamics. Their overall design was mostly credited to Wayne Cherry on this particular model. Anyway, let's look inside the brochure and see what else we can see. Okay, and now we are inside the brochure itself, showing the inside, a closer look at them unusual wheels, and also a little bit about its racing heritage. Jumping straight to that race car there, as you notice, that is back to the front flat-nosed Firenze. So like I say, there is some kind of like inconsistencies with this early brochure, because that of course became the Magnum Coupe. These particular Magnum race cars here shown here was a dealer team Vauxhall, and it did enjoy a lot of success with the Firenze, and indeed the Firenze HP also had a lot of success as well in racing. The top of the range standard, or the flat fronted Firenze, the top of the range one would have been called the 2300 SL, and that was the top model with the big engine in it. And that shared this sort of a 7-dial dashboard, as you can see on here on the HP. The HP, it's got a speed or clock, a rev counter, fuel, oil pressure, water temperature, and a battery charge on there as well. Sorry to confuse you, but I keep going back to the standard front nosed Firenze, then jumping back to HP. But kind of like the brochure itself is a little bit confusing, and like I said, the Firenze history is a little bit confusing as well. When the Firenze HP came out, or Droopsnoot if you prefer it to be called that, it was an expensive car, even though it came with great acclaim from the motor show, and motoring critics said it would sell thousands and thousands of these cars. It was an expensive car. It was around about 2,625 English pounds. And just to put that in perspective, the similar year Triumph Dolomite Sprinter, again another performance model, that was around about £1,868, and to be honest with you, it was nearly as fast as this. So in reality, that was probably the better buy at the time. One of the problems as well with this particular car is because it was a little bit different and a little bit non-standard from the original, it was quite a difficult car for them to build, and I'm sure there wasn't great profits in selling it, to the extent that they abandoned it in early 1975, and I think only around about 204 examples came off the production line, although I think a few of the pre-production models were also sold to the public, so it may be higher than that. You do often see them, but I think most of them you see aren't originals. I think they're just standard Firenze that someone's put that fiberglass nose in to replicate the vehicle, because like I say, it was sold in such low numbers. Like the brochure says, if we look at the engine, it's at 2.3, 131 brake horsepower. Doesn't sound a lot these days, 131 brake horsepower from a 2.3, but we're talking early 70s here, so it wasn't bad. It was a reasonably quick car, 0 to 60 around about 7.6 seconds, which is still reasonable even today, and a top speed of 120 miles an hour, helped by that aerodynamic fiberglass nose. It was a 5-speed gearbox, and one of the interesting things, and it does show the wheels here, they were a little bit different, these alloy wheels. There was this Avon safety rim concept, and it was the first one to have this particular safety rim concept alloy wheel. It mentions them 7-dial instrumentation, the interior, and it's saying the exterior you can only have it in one colour, and it was the colour that's shown here, this silver starfire is what they called it. And because it was a reasonably slippery shape with that nose on, fuel economy wasn't too bad at all. And it says here, due to combined aerodynamic shape and gear ratios, Firenze has a fuel consumption of 34.4 miles per gallon at 60, which is kind of like the most economical speed, and 30.1 around about 70. So it was a reasonably fuel efficient car then. So you'd think all these things would help the sales, but like I said, that high initial starting price was really the problem, and with competition selling their cars for much cheaper, it really wasn't a success. Well, maybe in some ways it was a success, but we'll talk about that in a moment. And finally on the back page we can see that much more familiar Vauxhall rear end that we're more familiar with. Like I say at the bottom, it does show on there that it was printed in England in October 73, so I do believe this was probably one of the first brochures, and who knows, maybe even came from that motor show. You can see some of the technical specification on this page, transmission, dimensions, some of the standard equipment as well. It was quite a well equipped car for the early 70s, or indeed you did have to pay for that. So there we go, the Vauxhall Firenze. Like I say, it wasn't a huge success, but certainly is a very collectible and often reproduced, striking looking car. If you go to any sort of motor shows or classic car shows, it's instantly recognisable. Not very successful, didn't make a lot of money for Vauxhall, didn't last too long, but it wasn't a complete failure. Its design kind of influenced Vauxhalls for years to come, and I kind of think it influenced a lot of cars. I mean, even if you look at the first Sierras, you can see how they rounded the front ends off to kind of like this sort of shape to get them more aerodynamic. So I'm sure it did influence not only Vauxhall models to come, but even other manufacturers to rethink their designs. Thank you once again for watching Quarterlight. I hope you've enjoyed this quick brochure review of the Vauxhall Firenze HP, and we'll see you very soon. So take care and goodbye.